Thank you, Robert. And our fourth speaker is Joseph Kitende.
I came to know about this when I was attending the Toronto-York Labour Council meeting the other Thursday, when one David Kidd brought it to our attention. When I picked the leaflet, I saw a lot of things that I have a clue about as a person who has been practicing in the labor movement of Africa for over 40 years as an activist. I thought I would be of some little help to the discussions here. If I will not lead the discussion in the right direction, I should be able to provoke those who can discuss it with passion and dedication. So I requested to participate, and I think about 3 days ago I was saying, you can come. And I'm very happy to be here. I'm here to talk about my experiences as a practitioner in the international labor movement. But of course, before I became a practitioner at the international level, I was at the shop stewards level and the national level for about 14 years in my home country of Uganda. I joined working life during the time of Idi Amin, the dictator, which was extremely very dangerous to do anything that would be seen as an alternative center of power in the country. But what I recall, and what might be useful to you, is that we had done work as members and as shop stewards for 3 years before we had our first training seminar as shop stewards. So our training seminar as shop stewards came 3 years later in 1979. And I vividly recall what I learned. I vividly recall it was the ICFTU and the Frederick Cabot Foundation that joined hands with the International Transport Workers Federation to give us that training. What are the roles of the shop steward? But we were union members, we had a union, but it had no budget to go into those details. So I'm a beneficiary of international solidarity in the first instance, although at some later stage I've also come to practice what I learned at the international level. I believe in trade unionism completely, and that's why no matter at what level I've been empowered to work, I've always gone back to my union. In my first life, I was a mechanic. Today, I'm an industrial relations specialist who has worked for all these organizations. I've worked for the ICFTU in Africa. I've worked for the ILO on labor reforms in Africa, in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and Zanzibar. Finally, I've worked for my own International Transport Workers Federation as the person responsible for the whole of Africa to coordinate workers' international action. So what I've been doing on a daily basis in Nairobi before I came to Canada has been to ensure that the unions in the 8 subsections of transport have some capacity to take action at their own level. And if they can't, they can be assisted by unions either in the sub-region or in the entire region of Africa, or we could even call for help from Canada and other countries in the global north when we need it. At some point in my coming few minutes, I'll tell you what we have done with Canada and what I think could be improved. Let me first of all pose one question. You all know South Africa, you all know apartheid, and you have followed what went on in South Africa and what has been going on. I don't know whether you remember that when Nelson Mandela was released and eventually became president of that country, he refused all invitations to visit countries and governments. And he said, I will choose where to go first. And I don't know whether you remember the first 2 countries he said, I can go. One of those most important countries he said he would go was Denmark. And people wondered why he said Denmark. People said he should have gone to Zambia because it was a frontline state. He should have gone to Angola because it was providing local soldiers. He should have gone to all those frontline states, but he didn't. He said he would go to Denmark, and the reason was understood later. He eventually went to Denmark, and he said he had gone to thank the maritime workers of Denmark for having fired the first shot that established a crack in the backbone of apartheid. There was a UN embargo against the apartheid regime. Nobody was supposed to supply oil to the apartheid regime. But as people picked microphones in the UN and all these international bodies, as soon as they put them down, they ordered ships to go. It is the maritime workers of Denmark who identified the problem and said, how can a UN embargo be flouted like this and nobody does anything? They reported to their union, and their union designed an action, which was a unilateral action. Only ITF knew about it and said, we shall support this. And they blockaded the first ship, which sent the message, and other unions in the Scandinavians joined, and eventually Australia joined. That is the first crack in the backbone of apartheid, showing that actually workers' international solidarity can work. And it can confront problems as big as apartheid. When Mandela went to thank the workers from the international solidarity action they had taken to see how apartheid could be overcome. Apart from that, I would like to encourage those who are skeptical about this international solidarity. It works, but it can be greatly improved, and I entirely agree with those who have given the different suggestions which can be digested, and we see how to improve it as per the objectives of the organizers. Because when you look at the objectives, they want us to evaluate what has Canada been doing in the international arena to support this cause. What has Canada been doing with the grassroots to participate more? When I talk about the grassroots, I move to my next point of saying that without grassroots participating, international labor solidarity is meaningless. It simply becomes an academic debate. I have lived in the grassroots, I've lived in the middle levels of the nation, I've headed a union in my country, I've headed the continent. But the thing employers fear most is workers taking simple actions that can damage the interest of the employer, however big the employer may be. I will show you a few examples. I will talk about a few examples. The ITUC, which was ICFTU, I had the opportunity to work for it, and for many years in the past decade, we fought against the World Bank, IMF, and its structural adjustment programs in Africa. And the ITUC also mobilized the rest of the world to challenge the World Trade Organization talks, which were not supporting workers. People thought we would never succeed to get anything because those were extremely powerful institutions, World Bank and the rest. I want to remind you that as we speak, through that international solidarity and the mobilization of the non-government organizations and other supporters of labor, the World Bank, lending arm, the IFC, adopted the core conventions of the ILO as part of its lending conditionalities. This ITUC knows. Today, a union can move against the funding of any project in any government if it violates those 8 core conventions of the ILO. The agreements are in place. And in fact, some examples have taken place in different countries. In Uganda, that achievement has been used by the building workers to stop the construction of the dam. And the government now knows that workers are not alone. When I moved to my own ITF is about 120 years old as a global union federation. It was formed in 1896, and on a battlefront, workers in Rotterdam were being beaten senseless because of a strike over working conditions and terms. And it is workers in Britain, in the maritime sector, that say those workers are powerless in Rotterdam. Unless those of us who are outside Rotterdam can organize and stop ships from going there, they can't win. From that time, the ITF was formed, it continues to operate, and it has a specific campaign called the FOC campaign, which ensures that substandard ships, the word flags of convenience mean, if I own a ship and I belong to Canada, I don't register it here. Where do I go to register it? I go to the Honduras, because the standards of enforcement are lower. I will go to Liberia because nobody will even know. They have just thousands of ships on the register, but they don't know whether they have toilets on them. They don't know whether they have clean drinking water. So the ITF campaign called FOC is running up to the present day. It is a continuous campaign. And how does it succeed? This brings us to the grassroots, the question on grassroots. The ITF FOC campaign is succeeding because it has 147 inspectors properly trained to check a ship and see whether the standards as laid out now in the new instrument, the one we call the MLC, the Maritime Labour Convention, whether those standards are in place on the ship. And when these inspectors get on board, no matter how powerful a captain is, he will know that action can be taken. And we have arrested innumerable ships in the waters and compelled them to respect the existing agreements. We have compelled them to pay money they had stolen from workers, and we have found it in employers' pockets and paid it back. The story is long, I can't go into it all, but the 147 inspectors have no power until the dock workers union in a given port knows what to do to arrest a ship, as assisted by the port authorities in a particular country with which the ITF has agreements. So the grassroots are key to the actual success of action. And if the Canadian unions want to achieve more success, you can look at the structures you already have. You have the labor councils. These labor councils are not everywhere in the world. I look at them as gold, where workers come and compare notes on what is happening in the field. I have been in those ones in Toronto many times now, and I say, oh my God, I wish we did this in Africa earlier. I tried on my own to do this in some countries. In fact, in some countries I was about to be deported by trade unionists themselves. They don't want to see that coordination also happening. If you go to certain countries in Africa, they will say, don't organize workers between different unions to discuss solidarity. These are challenges and contradictions, as my comrade here has been pointing out. BWI, Building Workers International, pulled off the greatest fight against the big multinationals. I take the FIFA to be a big multinational. FIFA, that organizes the World Cup. When the World Cup was to take place in South Africa, a few years ago, they started constructing stadiums, but under extremely poor working conditions. Casual labor, totally precarious. BWI, working with its local affiliates, said this has to be stopped. And they were the first international union to enter an agreement with the FIFA that the construction of all stadiums must follow the standards of work as laid down in the ILO. I would like to conclude by saying that the work that can be done to improve what Canadian unions can achieve is enormous, but it is doable because you already have where to start. Many of the countries don't have these structures which give workers the opportunity to break down a big issue. The problem we've had is that the issue of understanding this, the debate has been lifted too high. It has been made too academic for the workers who are the foot soldiers to actually understand which bullets to fire to deal with the multinationals. This debate must be taken down there and put where the workers can actually discuss and relate and associate with the struggles in the global north, and also know that it is reciprocity that can deliver it. The workers in the south have something to give, because these Canadian companies that are exploring oil in Africa can be injured there by those workers if they are shown exactly how those companies work. And when they are injured there, or they know they can be injured there, they will behave.